Between late 1968 and 1969, the San Francisco Bay Area became a landscape of dread and unanswered questions. On December 20th, 1968, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were found shot on Lake Herman Road near Vallejo. On July 4th, 1969, Darlene Ferrin was killed and Michael Mageau wounded at Blue Rock Springs in Vallejo. On September 27, 1969, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were brutally stabbed at Lake Berryessa in Napa County. And on October 11, 1969, taxi driver Paul Stein was shot and killed in his cab in Presidio Heights, San Francisco. These attacks crossed multiple jurisdictions: Vallejo Police, the Solano County Sheriff, the Napa County Sheriff, and the San Francisco Police Department, which created operational friction at a time when forensic science was limited. DNA profiling would not exist for another decade, so investigators had to rely on fingerprints, ballistics, blood typing, handwriting analysis, and eyewitness accounts. The era's social backdrop, with Vietnam War protests and the San Francisco counterculture, only amplified public anxiety and the sense that something terrible was unfolding. What turned these crimes into a regional horror was not just the savage violence, but the killer's taunting communications. After the Vallejo attacks, the author began mailing letters and encrypted ciphers to the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner. One of those ciphers was a 408-symbol message that was published and later solved by amateur cryptographers. In the letters, the writer claimed a name, mocked law enforcement, and promised more mayhem, dragging ordinary newspapers into a grotesque game and transforming isolated murders into a crisis that terrified residents and baffled police. That escalation set up the urgent, chaotic hunt that follows. On December 20th, 1968, investigators found David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen shot to death on Lake Herman Road near Vallejo. Their bodies were a brutal punctuation mark on a quiet county night, and the case became the first formal homicide inquiry into what would become a regional terror. The scene was clinical and grotesque. 2 victims in a parked car, fatal gunshot wounds, evidence logged by the Solano County Sheriff's Office, and questions that yielded no clear motive. That unanswered violence set a grim precedent. On July 4th, 1969, a repeat attack at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo left Darlene Ferrin dead and Michael Mageau wounded but alive. Mageau staggered into daylight with a raw, immediate account. His testimony proved pivotal. He described the assailant's approach and the vehicle involved well enough for Vallejo detectives to build eyewitness sketches and share leads across law enforcement. The 2 shootings, linked by location and ballistic similarities, pushed the Vallejo police and the Solano County Sheriff into coordinated but strained action, and public fear hardened. 10 days after the Blue Rock Springs assault, letters began arriving at the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Examiner, and the San Francisco Chronicle. Mailed July 31st, 1969, they contained a 408-symbol cipher that turned headline anxiety into a macabre puzzle. Amateur cryptographers took the gauntlet. Donald and Betty Harden of Salinas cracked the cipher and on August 8, 1969, revealed a message that read in part, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife." The decoded passage was a cold, arrogant manifesto. It did 2 things. It confirmed the author as the killer taunting the public, and it created an identifiable persona by coupling the letter's content with the strange circled cross symbol the writer used. Newspapers splashed the cipher in the message, turning an active homicide probe into a sensational media spectacle and increasing pressure on investigators. With a menacing persona emerging from the cipher and Mageau's descriptions guiding police sketches, the hunt acquired focus and fury and pushed the story toward new crimes and more cryptic communications. The violence escalated into ritual on September 27, 1969, at Lake Berryessa in Napa County. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were enjoying a picnic when an assailant in a bizarre executioner-style outfit attacked them with a folding knife. Shepard was left fatally wounded, and Hartnell fought for his life. Hartnell survived, and his immediate clinical account became an investigative linchpin. He described a man in a dark hooded costume with a white, circled cross emblem on the chest and a crude white bib, who bound the couple with a rope before delivering savage, stabbing blows. That costume turned a symbol from print into a live emblem of terror at a lakeside picnic. The circled cross motif mirrored the signature that had already appeared in the killer's mailed letters and ciphers. The scene also produced concrete traces: a rope, shoe impressions, puncture wounds, and Hartnell's precise description. Those details transformed conjecture into prosecutable leads and deepened the emerging Zodiac profile. 2 days after the attack, on September 29, 1969, Cecilia Shepard died of her wounds. Her death hardened public horror and confirmed that the killer was escalating from distant gunshots to intimate, bloody, close-contact assaults. Less than 2 weeks later, the murderer struck again in the city, ambushing taxi driver Paul Stine on October 11, 1969, in Presidio Heights. The cab murder was audacious, a daylight, urban execution that shredded any remaining illusion of safety. Patrol response, eyewitness observations, and neighborhood canvasses produced vehicle leads and suspect descriptions that police chased across jurisdictional lines. The killer compounded his brazenness by mailing proof. 2 days after Stine's death, the San Francisco Chronicle received a letter containing a small, blood-stained piece of Paul Stine's shirt. That tangible trophy authenticated the claim and inflamed the tabloids. Media coverage pivoted from reportage to obsession, splashing costume sketches, Hartnell's testimony, and the cloth fragment across front pages and broadcasts. The combination of survivor testimony, a macabre costume tied to the Zodiac symbol, physical evidence like the costume and the shirt fragment, and witness vehicle leads turned a string of crimes into a pattern investigators could pursue. Police and the public braced for whatever the killer might do next. Investigators relied on everything available: handwriting analysis, ballistics, blood typing, latent prints, and witness composites. They were trying to turn the Zodiac's savage randomness into prosecutable facts. Vallejo Police, the Solano County Sheriff's Office, the Napa County Sheriff's Office, and the San Francisco Police Department traded evidence and leads, but jurisdictional tension flared as the cases overlapped across murders on Lake Herman Road, December 20, 1968, Blue Rock Springs, July 4, 1969, Lake Berryessa, September 27, 1969, and Presidio Heights, October 11, 1969. Forensic technicians compared bullets and casings, cataloged shoe and tire impressions, and typed blood using ABO methods that could narrow suspects but not uniquely identify a killer. Latent fingerprints recovered at scenes were partial, and routine AFIS searches returned no definitive hit. Handwriting experts pored over the taunting letters and the solved 408-symbol cipher, hunting for consistent strokes and idiosyncrasies. Detectives collected handwriting exemplars from persons of interest, most notably Arthur Lee Allen, but exemplars produced ambiguous matches that kept suspects in files rather than in court. Composite sketches based on Michael Mageau's account and other eyewitness statements plastered grim, grainy faces across newspapers and amplified public panic. Yet the sketches yielded more leads than answers as descriptions conflicted and alibis shifted. Then, on November 8, 1969, a more complex 340-symbol cipher arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle. Its baffling transposition and apparent homophone stalled code breakers and deepened the sense that the killer was deliberately raising the stakes. Every promising lead, a partial fingerprint, a shoe print, a suspect with inconsistently reported whereabouts, frayed under scrutiny. Media pressure forced repeated reviews, detectives re-interviewed witnesses, and cold tips swelled into a growing suspect ledger. But the investigation ground toward an impasse. Abundant horror and detail, yet no irrefutable link to a living, identifiable murderer. As forensic avenues narrowed and the 340-symbol cipher sat unsolved for decades, the hunt hardened into a tense freeze frame, poised either to crack with a decisive breakthrough or to calcify into an enduring, terrifying mystery. The investigation hit a strange, single crescendo when the killer mailed a 340-symbol cipher to the San Francisco Chronicle on November 8, 1969. The message was dense and inscrutable, a puzzle that turned an already ghastly story into a national obsession. It came after the October 11, 1969 murder of taxi driver Paul Stine and the October 13th letter that included a small, blood-stained scrap of Stine's shirt. Tangible proof that pushed newsroom headlines into public panic. The 340-symbol transmission felt like a theatrical dare, precise, cryptic, and built to stall investigators. For decades, cryptanalysts, both amateur and professional, obsessed over its transpositions, homophones, and permutations. Police replayed survivor statements from Michael Mageau and Brian Hartnell, rechecked ballistic links between Blue Rock Springs and Lake Herman Road, and compared handwriting against suspects such as Arthur Lee Allen. Still, the cipher refused to give up its secret, and the steady stream of taunting letters became the killer's most baffling legacy. After that crescendo, the string of confirmed murders stopped. The last homicide firmly tied to the Zodiac remains Paul Stine on October 11, 1969, and the manhunt settled into a sprawling cold case. The unresolved cipher and the macabre correspondence denied closure. When a team led by David Oranchak, Sam Blake, and Jarl Van Eyck finally announced a solution to the 340-symbol cipher in December 2020, it revealed words but no name. The finale was theatrical and unfinished. Cryptic puzzles and cruel missives outlived justice, cementing the Zodiac's mythic, nightmarish hold on the public imagination. After years of silence and a theatrical string of taunting letters, the Zodiac case left a brutal legacy. Families of David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Darlene Ferrin, Michael Mageau, Brian Hartnell, Cecilia Shepard, and Paul Stine endured decades of grief, public scrutiny, and unresolved questions that deepened their trauma. The killings exposed law enforcement failures and forced agencies to rethink jurisdictional boundaries. The result was improved interagency cooperation, multi-agency task forces, and evidence-sharing protocols. Forensics also evolved, moving from blood typing and ballistics to DNA profiling, AFI's fingerprint databases, and genetic genealogy techniques that transformed cold case work, though none has definitively named the Zodiac. In December 2020, cryptanalysts David Oranchak, Sam Blake, and Jarl Van Eyck announced a solution to the 340-character cipher, clarifying some grisly phrases but not identifying the killer. The case spawned amateur sleuths, podcasts, and a true crime industry that reshaped journalistic ethics around victims and evidence. The Zodiac remains a grotesque reminder that some crimes resist closure. The hunt for truth continues, demanding rigor, restraint, and compassion.